It's a real pleasure to have you on our webinar. So this morning we are going to focus on post-COVID education market for both universities and also accommodation providers. Namely, we have on this webinar, we have over 57 of you attending from over 30 universities and property sites. So the education market is highly mature. And most of you on this webinar are doing some form of activation engagement on multi-channels such as social, search, web, and so on. But things have changed significantly since post-COVID in China. Behavior has changed, opportunities has changed, and that's what we're going to focus on today. It's no longer enough just to have a presence on channels in China. It's all about being relevant and timely. One of the big things that myself and Rocky will focus on today is converting through the funnel. So no longer thinking just purely about the number of applications you've had for either accommodation or universities, but thinking about how you're going to convert that funnel, because that is where the whole is going to be come January 2021. So just to give you a few guidelines as to how this session will work, we will start with Rocky, and then it will move on to me, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. Please, please, please do post your questions, and we would endeavour to do as many of them as we can at the end of this. And if anybody, we can't get around to answering your question, I do promise I will email you later today and we will answer your question. We will also be, anybody who stays to the end of this webinar, there is a guide that Rocky and I have written, top 5 things to think about and to make sure you're doing for quick wins for 2021 recruitment. So I will send you to a landing page. If you don't manage to take a screen grab of the link, then we will be emailing you to do. We will also be talking about an audit that we're offering just 10 universities or accommodation providers in order to benchmark you against your competitors. This is based on software that we've actually invested quite heavily in. So it's a maximum of 10, I'm afraid. So I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our speakers. I'm joined this morning by lovely Rocky, who a lot of you have met, who is our head of consultancy and also our B2B and education planning lead at Emerging Communications. Now, Rocky, before she joined us 4 years ago, nearly 5 years ago, had 10 years of experience in mainland China working for agencies and also client side, and brings a plethora of skills with her team in terms of consultancy for our education brands. Myself, I've now been in the Chinese market 9 years, launched the company 5 years ago, and my particular specialism is I work with universities in order to integrate teams. One of the things that we'll talk about today is a quick win, because let's face it, it's all about quick wins at the moment, will be about integration of effort between international, digital and sales teams within China. You cannot work in silo with each other. There isn't time. And in order to have a voice that is the same at every step of that journey, it's absolutely paramount. We work with a lot of universities to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to move over to Rocky.
Thank you, Domenica. Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's session. This year has been very different and very difficult. I would like to open today's session with the positive signs of the market recently. So Chinese students are not canceling their plans because of COVID. This was data from the latest report that QS done among all the international students around the world. The report was just released last month, and it's very interesting that only 10% of Chinese students have decided to change their plans of studying overseas or changed the university destination. So they are not canceling their plan. Majority of them are delaying their entry or deferring. And there's a large chunk of them are still waiting and see. I would say that among all of the international students, countries, EU, India, North America countries included, Chinese students are definitely the most steady group. They're gradually flying to the UK at the moment now, as you all know, and a lot of, I know some of you have done incredible job in terms of, getting them in here, and all the plans, yes. So I think the overall kind of like picture is quite positive in terms of, Chinese students' determination to their destination studying country. These it's kind of like I want to talk about for those who are arriving soon, those students who are arriving soon for the September intake this year. The most demanded area they are requesting for the university in terms of overall support and everything. Interestingly, among all countries, Chinese students are holding the least percentage in willing to moving more lectures online. I think it's a kind of like I think they work really hard. Like it's a year of preparation, intensive preparation. It's a big kind of like family plan getting them here. So these actually indicates that they wish to have a full experience in the UK rather than just getting academic degree from online. So they are actually the least group, the least willing group to in terms of moving more and more lectures online. In terms of their most concerned areas and the most demanded support, apparently a dedicated support team from the university and health professionals is highly demanded by Chinese students who are coming soon, as well as sanitizing facilities on campus. I know like there are a number of them, like they're gradually flying here, and just kind of like just be sure that you are taking good care of them because they are posting on social media every single day. There's a hashtag created by students on Weibo, and so they are kind of like they're actually broadcasting how they are or been taken care of once they landed in here. So it's very important that you have a kind of like a dedicated resource to checking on what's going on social in terms of proper social listening and sentiment surrounded your university and experience by Chinese students. Then what about those who are preparing for 2021 intake? For those, they are keen to know alternative forms of study and how agile university could be under uncertain circumstances. How flexible they could be once they took your offer, and also sorry, can everybody still hear me? Cool, because my headphone ran out of battery. So choosing a suitable program is now the priority of today's Chinese prospective students. The time of pure ranking game has already gone. It's the suitability that matters the most. It's also worth mentioning in terms of choosing a study destination, don't just think about country. Destination means city. Although it's quite important for UK university to tell stories of your city, although UK is geographically tiny in Chinese eyes, but still, if your universities in Scotland, Northern Ireland, or any non-London cities, you can tell your unique stories and make sure that they have a certain level of understanding of the local culture. Yeah. Moving on, some excitement because actually their continued support and positivity from the Chinese government. First of all, they're keeping a close eye on Chinese students all over the world and those who are planning to come soon. So they've announced a very positive statement in June, saying that the impact of the epidemic on overseas study is only temporary. Studying abroad continues to be a very important method for training talent. That's from Chinese government very positive voice. They're gonna continue to support and taking care of students, Chinese students all over the world. The record high number of Chinese application to UK UG 2020 intake has also picked up by the central media of China as a positive sign delivered to students and families. And also a much easier process has been launched for returnee students getting the official certificate of their overseas degrees in China. I think the new process was launched these months, and it's pretty encouraging because it used to be a very complicated process. Now they're kind of like easing the process. And also in China, overseas returnees are continuing to treat it as an important group of talents with various benefits provided by the central and local government. The benefits include special pass on registered permanent residence in Tier 1 city. It's really hard to get in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, etc. So they got a special path. And also they're providing fundings and supports for returnee students in terms of entrepreneurships and also benefits for R&D talents particularly, and even tax-free purchase for vehicles. So the positivity delivered by Chinese government would further encourage Chinese students to continuing study abroad despite the effect of whatever happened this year. Another positive voice actually from all the industry leaders in China. From 2003 to today, China remains the largest source of studying in international destinations. In the past 2 decades, 70% of them returned to China and have become very important influencers and leaders in their industries. And also 30% of those students settled down in global destination and became global citizens. Very recently, a panel talk was held by LinkedIn China on one of the largest online video streaming platform. Industry leaders, which I kind of like got their portrait here, were invited to share their own experience in studying abroad and encouraging students to keep the faith during this difficult time, to open their mind and chasing their dream in overseas studying destination. I would like to quote this lady, Zhang Yan, the publisher from Financial Times. Keep the faith, a new chapter is coming out. It's more than just a saying to students, it's saying to every one of you today. The new chapter is coming out for the UK universities. Yeah, so now I'm moving to kind of like interpretation of positive signs, particularly insights up to date for UK education market. According to the research done by the largest overseas study agent in China regarding the post-COVID preferred destination, UK ranked #1. It's actually the second year that UK beat US, and also with 9% increase in a year also in terms of students' interest in UK as their favorite destination. More than 120,000 Chinese students came to UK last year, which we were talking about 34% increase in the past 5 years. If you compare to the second biggest source country, second biggest country of kind of like who are sending students to here, which is India. Last year, the number were only like it's only not even a quarter compared to Chinese students population in here. I would say that the credit actually goes to every single UK university and every single Chinese student who ever studied in here, being your biggest advocates in China. Even during the COVID, I think overall, compared to other destinations, apparently the States, New Zealand, Australia, overall, I think all of you together are doing a great job in terms of comforting and encouraging Chinese students. Also the close communication between UK and Chinese embassy during the COVID outbreak stage, and also the overall sentiment on Chinese social media of the students are currently in the UK compared with those who stuck in other countries. Overall, the sentiment becomes positive, and they're kind of like, they're taking care of themselves and they're following government instruction, and also they're communicating with universities quite often and open. So yeah, so also the proactivity of many of you since the very beginning of this year, really impressive. I would say how agile you did and how quickly you responded. So yes, so credit to all of you. In terms of why UK is now the #1 destination, I listed all of the kind of like key components in here that making UK the most preferred destination now. Firstly, definitely the shorter time in higher education system compared to the US majorly. Basically, 4 years you can finish UG and PG here, and it takes 6 or sometimes even 7 years in the States. And also the recognition of academic excellency of UK education, it's very kind of like, it's very established, especially among parents' eyes. It's a destination with cultural history and heritage, and also the social stability is much better than the other countries. And the value of studying investment definitely boosted by the opportunities from PSW visa, which is launching this year. And a career progression is very important, not just for those who freshly graduated from Chinese university UG students, but also for people like me who took a career break after several years of working in China and seeking for a career progression in here. Yeah, and a lot of influence from family and also the recognition from industry. UK is actually the most preferred kind of like studying country in Chinese employers' eyes in terms of employing returnees. Nearly 50% of HR's interview agreed that UK was their kind of like favorite. And also the last one, the rising one, reason, property. A large segment of Chinese UK property buyers are purchasing for their children to use as well as mid-long-term investment. Even the actual date of university enrollment might be years away. According to China's biggest international residential property agency, GY, inquiries have climbed significantly in 2020 with a year-on-year increase of more than 200%. So combine all of the factors together, UK in Chinese students and parents' eyes are becoming more than just a studying destination. It's a place that they kind of like, they want to kind of like have their children to become the global talents. It's a global destination for them to settle down, experience, and enjoy. In terms of the latest trends, what is the trend telling us in the last 2 years? We can see Chinese students are entering the UK education system earlier. So if you look at the number of Chinese students who are studying at high schools in the UK, where it was only in 2014, the number was less than 5,000. But now we're talking about, more than 10,000 of them studying in the high schools in the UK. And also the undergrad students have grown 20% in 3 years. So they're coming to the UK earlier, and they're staying in here longer. For example, especially high net worth families are very keen on getting their children into the elite education system as earlier as possible from private school, and then they're gonna continue their UG studying in here, their PG studying in here. So it's the biggest it's the biggest insight that the trend is telling us. They are coming here in earlier ages. In terms of major choosing, I would say diversification is the key word for both UG and PG. We all know that in the past decade or even 2 decades, business and management related courses are definitely the star courses for Chinese students. For sure, they're pouring into those majors. But in recent 3 years, in terms of undergrad applicants, the intention to study business and management courses have decreased 11% in the last 3 years, and computer science is rising. This is because of the the AI, big data, all of the career opportunity and employability in China. In terms of postgraduate trend, you can see the the dashboard in here, year and compare region. You can see business management and also the traditional media and communication, which used to be traditional star courses of UK students to attract Chinese students. They are both dropping slightly. And let's see who are rising. Education, including TESOL, and other education related courses. Engineering, architect, that's largely down to the 1-by-1 role initiation in China, which is going to continue. And law is slightly rising, only 1%. Computer science, AI are rising in terms of postgraduate majors. So it's important for you, your university marketing team, to keep up with what's going on with their major choose, and also important to have your own record be deeply analyzed to see which part of your major subject area, which courses are rising, which courses are dropping, because it's very important for you to understand what's the earned star courses in your offerings to Chinese students, which means you don't need to put the budget behind it to promote it in paid campaign, and what is the most potential growing area, and what courses won't really work, you should actually drop, so you can achieve a better ROI. If you have any question, we welcome to ask in the Q&A session. Now I'm passing it back to Domenica. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rocky. Really, really insightful. So Rocky's talked about today's basically post-COVID era in terms of what the data is telling us. I'm now going to go through in as much detail as one has in 20 minutes before the Q&A session, how to actually go about this. So what we decided to do is to split down into 5 key areas, or 5 key tips, for want of a better word, in terms of how to not only attract Chinese students to apply to your university or to your accommodation provider, but more importantly, to accept an offer. Essentially, I'm going to talk through these 5 elements. The first one is timing. Then I'm going to talk about segmenting your audience down and your students and alumni and parents, the competitive set, the sales journey of your student. It's still a sales journey, and basically then converting through the funnel. This is probably the biggest change that we've seen emerging communications, and this is very much mirrored by agents we've been speaking to in market. So agents are telling all of their students, it's so competitive, you really need to get on with it. And what we're seeing is we're seeing the student journey being 4 or 5 months earlier than we've seen in any other academic cycle. So an awful lot of your students have already done their due diligence. They've already been looking at their English tests. They've got everything prepared. They are now looking at basically application. So this is a good quarter before we normally see this. This is a really, really critical point for this webinar and for you to take home today. If everything's got sooner or earlier, you need to then make sure you mirror your marketing efforts and promotions to mirror that. Of the application cycle, we're looking at now until just pre-Christmas. So we need to make sure that whatever marketing you're doing is mirrored to that part of the sales journey. And more importantly, that you are then looking at converting through the funnel early part of next year, which is very, very different to what we're used to. Now, students, as Rocky said in the first part of this webinar, are applying to more universities. They've got more offers. This means it's highly, highly competitive. And most often when we talk to universities' KPIs, it will always be set that the KPI is the number of applications you get. Most universities within their digital department, that is their KPI. And all too often it's forgotten about, well, how many people are going to accept our offer? So there are now more offers being held by students. It's now more competitive and actually converting through the funnel. So that part is very, very, very critical. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. So the timetable's changed. You need to be starting things earlier. We're going to talk about some quick wins in a little bit. Next. So in terms of roadblocks, there are a number of roadblocks that universities face. Let's be honest here. You're now in a situation that we've never been in before. We're going to see another wave in the UK. But as Rocky rightly said, universities have done such an incredible job in the last 6 months, right the way through self-isolation, quarantining, care bundles, looking after students, pastoral care, all of those things that we've actually come out top in terms of all the countries in the world and the way we look after students. So that's like a massive tick. So we know we've got students here and we know that we're trying to get students for 2021 recruitment. All too often within universities, there are a number of roadblocks, and it's pretty much the same with the universities we dealt with. The first one might be that your KPIs are driven by applications and not by conversions. That has to change. The second one is communication between marketing, digital, international, and your sales teams in China, all having different jobs. So for example, the sales team in China quite often has a sales KPI, but they are salespeople. Yet an awful lot of universities will also get them doing activation and marketing. That marketing used to be going to education fairs. That has completely changed. So now there is a heavier reliance on things like webinars, but there is a growing sense of make things live streaming, webinars. That has got to replace what we used to be offline events. And I see more of those coming through. The other thing is quite often budget allocation. Universities are very used to putting budgets behind paid. So the digital department will have a budget. The international department will have a budget, which used to be used predominantly for offline engagement. And then the team in China may well be tasked with, say, running your social media and actually taking students through the application process. You need to rethink those KPIs, you need to rethink those budgets and make them part of one student acquisition as well as conversion budget. And finally, think about your resource. The guide that anybody who stays on to the end of this webinar that we will send on afterwards talks a little bit about community management. And I can't stress enough how important that is. So if you've got a student that's already got an offer from you, they will ask a lot of questions, and they will normally do that through WeChat. Some of them might be in a translated FAQ within WeChat, might be on your website. The sorts of questions that we're answering on behalf of universities tend to be quite similar. And at the moment, a lot of it's around COVID safety. Who's going to pick me up from the airport? How are you going to look after me should I get COVID? Make sure that you answer these in a timely fashion. Do not leave them. These are the sorts of questions that make or break in terms of conversion. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. So there are roadblocks, but now is not the time to think about them. Now is the time to kind of go, okay, what can we do as a university to get over these roadblocks? Let's talk about some quick wins. That's what everybody needs right now. So what actions can you take as a brand right now to make a difference. The first one, which is the most obvious one that we are a little bit, I suppose, surprised when we talk to new universities that come and we work with, or new accommodation providers, is the quickest win is right there, and that's data. So what's your GA data, your Google Analytics, your Baidu, Weibo insights, academic records, application records tell you about you as a university? So what's the demographic breakdown of the students that have applied and have also come to the university in the last 3 years? Where do they live? Where do they reside? Are they coming via agents or direct? What courses are they applying for? And also, how have they applied? And where are they getting stuck? Are they getting stuck at the application bit? In other words, do you need to have a look at the journey when they're filling in an application form? Do they need help with that? Is it too complicated? Could you move that to WeChat? Or is it just that they're going to agents because it's easier to pay because you're not accepting certain payment methods? You need to find that out quickly. And the best thing to do, get everybody together on a Zoom call, on a WeChat call, including your China office, and ask these questions and interrogate them. It will take you one day at most to interrogate this data. This is the sorts of information that you need to not presume, because you might be surprised. And I think the biggest trend and change, and this is something Rocky talked about, is the sorts of subjects that students are now inquiring about. The faculties that they're going for are very different. We're seeing drops in things like management and MBAs from previous years, but we're seeing such an increase in education, mathematics, data, AI, engineering. And so this is something also being very much pushed by the Chinese government in order for students to get postgraduate studies in, especially. So be really sure, if you're finding that certain faculties are already full, don't waste your marketing effort on those, your efforts into the areas where you're needing to fill certain faculties, or more importantly, make sure you communicate to students that you even have expertise in that area. Be really clear as well who you're targeting. Once you have this data, and if you don't know, then speak to somebody who can help you. We can help you. Talk to an expert. Get objective advice as to who your key target market is. All of you are operating in completely different competitive sets. Some of you are Russell Group. Some of you are really, really good at business. Some of you are in areas of the country that are very safe, and that's going to be your biggest unique selling point. You need to know what that is, and who has been your past student and who's enjoyed it and who your alumni are. That will then guide your segmentation, which is very, very critical. You can't be all things to all peoples. Focus on your unique strengths. That is then where your effort should be. That's where the channel effort should be. That's where the paid effort should be. And that should drive your strategy. It's no different being a university to being any kind of brand. You need to think about who you're targeting, and that will then fuel your content, the context, the messaging, and the channels that you are active on. Now, this is a biggie. When I entered this market 9 years ago, there was hardly any activity from universities. It wasn't really mature. In fact, universities that had 1 or 2 people in market had Weibo and WeChat, a little bit of Juhu. But then, of course, a lot of them started to invest in paid search, maybe got a Chinese microsite. Those days have gone. Students now are very, very, very picky. They want to come to the UK, but they have so much choice out there. There is so much noise. There's over 2,500 posts on just 2 social media channels for China a month. Every single one of those posts is different. So how is a student going to choose your university over another? Do you even know what your competitors are doing? This is a critical thing. If you know what your competitors are doing, you can benchmark your effort against that. There is no point benchmarking you as a brand or as a university or as an accommodation provider if you're competing with everybody. You'd have to spend too much budget. Be very clear who your 4 key competitors are and have a look at what they're doing. And if you can't do that, speak to somebody who can. We're going to talk about an audit at the end and social listening. Absolutely critical to be able to benchmark your activity against your competitors. If they're doing things that are really, really effective, getting a lot of interaction, a lot of shares, a lot of comments on social, why aren't you doing that? Are you doing that? Can you do things better? Are you doing webinars? Are you doing live streaming? Are you talking to your current universities on campus right now? Can some of those become student ambassadors? Can they be your voice? So really be objective. And I have to say, it is impossible almost to be objective if you work for the university. To talk to somebody or talk to other people, talk to agents, an agency, talk to others who can offer you objective advice as to where you're positioned and what your unique selling points are. Moving on to tip number 4. So we talked a little bit about the key channels, Baidu, Weibo, WeChat. Increasingly, universities are using video channels, Douyin, Bilibili, also Juhu, which is a Q&A channel, other forms of search, live streaming on different channels such as Weibo, webinars. A year ago, there was a real heavy reliance on your sales teams within China to basically be education fairs. A lot of that has now moved online. So make sure you have pivoted your budget that way. Make sure that you're aware that if students, are going to choose your university, you've got to bring your university alive, and be aware of every stage of the sales funnel, from research phase, which a lot of them have done pre sort of September, October, but there's still those doing it, right the way through to they've applied to your university, they're going through the application process, they have an offer, converting that offer, looking after the student when they're on campus, and then alumni. Do not be under any illusion that if you just look after students to the point that they apply, you will fall short come spring of next year. There are too many students with 5 to 9 offers on the table, or that's the way they're going. And they will go to the universities. They will choose accommodation that has fulfilled not only their questions, so community management through WeChat, but also their criteria. So know what their criteria is and make sure you are filling the funnel all the way through with the right channel and the right messaging. No longer is enough just to broadcast about your faculty information, to be thinking about league tables. And I had a interesting conversation, they're not on this webinar, with a top Russell Group university yesterday who just couldn't understand why they were falling short, and they are doing nothing to activate their potential students. They have just effectively got an attitude of, well, we're a Russell Group university and everybody's heard of us. Why is it then that other universities that are not as high ranking are actually getting their students? Because they're engaging with them, because they're relevant, because they are doing things to bring the university alive. So there are real opportunities here for universities of all sorts, of whatever is your league table, whatever is your unique selling point. There are students out there looking for your university. You just have to tell them about yourself. And also be agile. So here we are going into October, and I cannot believe how much we as a business have had to pivot the services to our clients. We're doing it every single week and every single month. And now is a better time than ever, really, to demonstrate you've got to be agile with your plan. If you had a plan in place a year ago, you need to rip it up and start again. You really need to be thinking about, what are my quick wins? What can I do now to get offers on the table? How can we start converting that funnel? Let's get people collaborating. Let's rethink our KPIs, because the opportunities are there, but the competition has never been higher, which means that you've got to do things better and more relevant than your competitors are. Which moves me on to the final tip number 5, the most important thing to take away from today. If you remember nothing else, remember this: conversion. Everybody we speak to, I think without exception, is focused on application KPIs. Great, we've done brilliantly. And in fact, so many universities on this webinar right now have got so many applications that they're rubbing their hands with glee and going, great, we can take our foot off the pedal. No, you can't. Converting those offer holders is going to be critical, because students have so many offers on the table. And it's what you say in that stage of the funnel that's critical. That means that you've got to be aligned with what your sales team are saying in China, who is answering inquiries through WeChat, who is answering inquiries in market and also in the UK or in Europe, wherever you're based, and making sure you're socially listening all the time. What are your actual students on campus saying? Are they happy? And as Rocky said, I think the UK has done a phenomenal job. But if they're happy, post it, share it. Share the wonderful things you're doing with them. Be aware that this is, you know, a scary time. It's a new country and navigating their way through COVID-19. But also, just those little things are the sorts of things that students will share. And you need to be thinking about right content, right time, right context throughout the whole of the sales funnel. And then when they enroll, when they accept an offer, please don't forget about them. Set up WeChat groups, engage with them way ahead of time, answer their questions. And there are some incredible things some of our clients are doing, right the way from meeting and greeting at airports to care packages. All of these things matter. And make sure you're engaging with your students on campus, and make sure you're engaging with your alumni as well, because they're the best marketing voice you've got. And they cost nothing to engage because they had an amazing time at your university. Yet all too often universities don't engage with them at all, or it's a separate budget and it's not aligned with what you're doing. So it's not pure ranking anymore. The sorts of criteria that students are looking at will be safety, will be pastoral care, will be how can I make friends if I'm basically going to be, you know, in my accommodation? What happens if I have to self-isolate? Who's going to support me with my lectures? All these things, all these questions and concerns, you need to know what they are, and you need to be answering them either directly or through your content outreach. So in summation from today's webinar, these are the critical key points. COVID is not stopping Chinese students coming to the UK. The UK is now the #1 education destination. This has been largely driven by Trump administration and also by closed borders in Australia. But this is the best opportunity you on this webinar are going to have in your academic career. So use it, but be a little bit smarter with how you're using your budget. They're entering the system earlier. Your sales funnel is starting and has already started. So what are you doing, and what can you do to activate now? Do not leave it till after Christmas. It will be too late. And the 5 key things to think about are timing, get going now, start activating things such as your low hanging fruit that we've talked about, webinars, bringing things alive, activating your students on campus right now. 2, be clear who your students are and their parents and alumni. Be clear where you're positioned. Get objective advice around that. I'll talk about that in a second. Know your USPs and segment your market. China is a huge country. If you don't know who your students are and what faculties they're searching for and why they're going to come to your university, you're going to spend a lot of money and a lot of it will be wasted. Number 3, objective advice around your competition as well. Be very clear who you're competing with. Have a look at what they're doing, learn from what they're doing, and be better and smarter than they are. It doesn't mean spending more money. It means being smarter. Number 4, think of every stage of the customer journey. Are you tapping into every stage of the customer journey? Are you, as a university, integrating your teams to do that? Number 5, converting offer holders. Make sure that you have a plan and a promotional budget for that. If you had a promotional budget before for offline engagement, for attending events, you could put a large chunk of that to conversion of offer holders. You could be doing webinars now. You could be doing live streaming now. So that's a quick win to pivot the fact that everything's moving online away from some offline tactics that used to be really, really important. One of the things that we've found at Emerging Communications when we've spoken to new brands is all too often, if we ask questions such as, what are your competitors up to? Where do you stand in the market? What are your content pillars? You know, your unique selling points, how you benchmarked against your competition. What are you doing well and what aren't you? They can't answer those questions. We invested quite heavily because of COVID-19 in some software. It's not a question of us manually doing the auditing. We're auditing all of the channels, not just Weibo and WeChat, of your key competitors so that you can benchmark where you sit. We can only do it for 10 because we're doing it very, very inexpensively, because then our planning team have to then take the insights out of that data. But you end up with a gap analysis of where you need to fill your gaps and a clear action plan of where you can focus your budget and your time and your effort for quick wins. If you're going to do this, we're only doing it for 10 brands or 10 universities or accommodation providers, and after the first 10, it will go back to normal rates. So there is a URL which I'll share in a minute, but if you miss it, we will follow up via email, and we will send you further details, and we'll get on a call with you. It's absolutely critical that you start to look at your competitive set, what they're up to benchmark your activity, and to have a very clear idea of what your unique selling points are that you can communicate. Before I move on to Q&A, which I'll do in a second, you will, if you follow that URL, be sent a student report. That just essentially surmises what was in this webinar. You might want to then share that around your organization to other departments for quick wins. Follow us on YouTube. This webinar will be edited and will be put on YouTube next week. We have all of our webinars that we've shot in the last 6 months on our Emerging Comms YouTube channel. Subscribe to it. We're always posting information. I did a couple of vlogs last couple of days with the lovely Mortienne, who heads up our content. One is on the top 5 tips for content outreach for universities, and the other one is on content strategy. So you'll find those there as well. And we've also done an awful lot of property webinars recently, which some of the property providers will find of interest. And also follow myself on LinkedIn as well as Emerging Comms, and we're also on Twitter. So a massive thank you to Rocky for such an insightful first part of the webinar. We are now going to move on to Q&A and stop sharing. And I'm the only one that can see the Q&A here. So Rocky, these are some of the questions that we've been asked by the attendees on the webinar. One question was, is it too late? Normally our budgets or our recruitment starts January for the academic cycle, and you're saying that we need to start earlier. What should we do to pivot quickly? It's just not the way we normally do things, which is something we know only too well, I think.
Well, it's only gonna get later. You're kind of like try to, I would say, focus on one thing first and get the quick win solution as soon as possible. Don't overcomplicate it. Focus on one thing. Could be the most potential course that you want to promote, the most potential faculty that you can live streaming together with recruitment team, the lecturers, and the current student. You don't have to kind of like start with a full large chunk huge plan. Just first of all, I would say collaborate internally with all of the departments that involved, and collaborate with your agents, collaborate with your current student and alumni to put together a quick win strategy at least before Christmas. If you action now, you won't be too late. But if you overcomplicating things, or if you are terrified by all of the roadblocks we mentioned, then it's definitely gonna be too late. When you feel that you are ready, you're already kind of like far behind.
I concur. I would say that the quickest win is to get your departments across digital, international, sales and marketing on a Zoom call this afternoon. Have a look at one budget, try and integrate that budget, and basically start to think about low-hanging fruit. Do live streaming, webinars, talk to all of your new Chinese students who've arrived this week or are arriving this week. Start to engage with them, engage with alumni. And in fact, that brings me on to one of the questions. He's asked by somebody, what are the top 3 tactics to utilize the alumni market for lead gen and conversion?
Know some of you have alumni team and often do offline alumni events in China. I feel like the top angle I would suggest it's the from the employability perspective, because your alumni are resourceful and they're probably already somebody in the industry. So getting them, connect them with your offer holders of a particular subject area. So rather than doing a huge one with no specific targeted topic, I suggest to kind of like almost like a kind of like a bundle, or it's kind of like a put them into groups. Like if you have alumni for certain subject areas, connect them with those subject area overholders and prospective students to share their story. It would be much better to kind of like from their perspective rather than from university, from your brand. So get them on webinar, get them on group chat, or even set up a sort of program, mentor program.
Yeah.
Yeah, mentor program. I know a lot of you have global mentor program, but if you set up for Chinese students, that would be brilliant. The second thing would be maybe thinking about how alumni can benefit your current students in terms of their career progression and employability. Whether you can do kind of like internship programs together, placement together, that would be also like really good. Number three is I would say don't be afraid to reach out to alumni, and don't be afraid to ask to request for like different form of collaboration. Yes, working in China is very busy, but I feel like from my experience and the alumni we've interviewed, they are very proud if they can do something for the university. So the emotional bond was already there. So you just need to reach out to them more proactively. Yeah.
Another question we've had is from a student accommodation provider. And obviously we have a number of student accommodation providers that we look after. So Rocky, when do Chinese students start looking for accommodation in the UK? Is that going to change post-COVID?
I think, wow, this is a big question. Yes, and it's gonna keep changing.
Yeah.
I would say flexibility is what they're looking for, and also open conversations, flexibility on how you're gonna, because we can't predict the circumstances changing we don't know whether there's there's wave 2, we don't know whether there's wave 3 or 4 next year. So it's how flexible you can be in terms of I know it's really hard to change terms of contract, but in terms of deposit, in terms of what if, I think it's the what if questions that matters, and the more what if scenario you can think of, the more prepared you are, and also you can like hit their spot, like, you know, this is exactly what I'm worrying about, and you've already thought about that.
Yeah, I would also add that a number of our student accommodation providers have created guides, and they've translated those guides into Chinese, and it's all about COVID safety. If you're an accommodation provider, it's absolutely critical that your potential students know the accommodation is not just COVID safe. What sort of support will they have within that environment, from reception all the way down to what happens if I have to self-isolate, what happens if we all have to quarantine, what happens if somebody gets COVID. That has to be addressed. So I think two things are happening. We know that students are applying to university earlier, so they'll be looking for accommodation earlier. So flexibility around contract and activating your marketing now and not next year is critical, but also making sure that when you've got a lead that comes through WeChat or comes into your office, that in order to convert that lead, a lot of that is going to be around safety, because it's the unknown. I mean, we sit here today and there's things we don't know. I mean, the government changes legislation all the time. So it's really about them feeling cared for, and safe is number one priority. And if you do that, you can be assured that only a few university accommodation providers are doing that. So definitely worth it. Just the last question then is from somebody around social listening. How important is social listening throughout the academic year, and how much effort should I put behind it?
2 or 3 years ago, I would suggest like weekly social listening would be enough. But in considering how powerful Chinese students are now on social media and the circumstance of COVID, I would say daily. Can action really fast. It's not about just crisis management. It's all about you can also picking up opportunities through social listening, and you're keeping up with, if you have an agency or a dedicated person running your social media, producing content, it's impossible to produce good content, relevant content, resonating content without social listening. So it's not a separate thing. It's kind of like it's integrate all of your ongoing production and everything. You need to stay in the context with the student. Otherwise, you won't get across. You won't cut through the noise.
I totally agree. I think things are changing so much at the moment. You're better off doing it for less time, but more often, as often as you can daily, ideally. Get one of your China team, your agency to just basically have a look at what's going on. It is as much about positive as it is about negative. It's about opportunities that you're going to find. It's just about sentiment. It's about people's reactions. And the universities and the accommodation providers that are talking to their students right now who are already arrived and are posting that content and sharing it are winning out for the next academic cycle. So we'll have to leave it there. We've answered most of the questions. Massive thank you to all of you who turned up today. If you are interested in having your university audited in terms of your competitive benchmark set, we're only doing it for 10. So first come, first served. Please email me at or us at info@emodingcoms.com. And follow us on YouTube. We are posting content all the time as things change. It's probably the quickest way to be aware of new video that we're putting up there, as well as myself on LinkedIn. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe. And we look forward to seeing you all again very soon.